Welcome to Revise and Resubmit, where we take cutting-edge research and try to break it down so you don't have to. I'm Pavlov, and with me as always,
Nikita.
All right, get ready, because today we're going to really dig into trust, how it works, especially on those global platforms, like Airbnb or Upwork, where you're kind of putting your faith in the hands of complete strangers.
Yeah, it's really something, isn't it? I mean, these platforms have totally changed the way we connect with each other. But it's also brought up a whole new set of, hurdles when you're trying to build trust with someone online.
You hit the nail on the head. And that's exactly where this research article we found comes in. Seal of approval. Trust signals and cultural distance in a global peer-to-peer platform market. Catchy title, right? But it focuses on this super interesting platform where people can list their homes for travelers, and everyone uses a special platform currency. No cash involved, which is kind of wild when you think about it.
Seriously, talk about trusting strangers. I mean, you're literally inviting someone you've never met into your home.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of their findings, I think we should take a step back and talk about why trust is so crucial on these platforms. I mean, we trust companies all the time, right? But what makes this different?
It's a great question. Think about it this way. On these platforms, you're not just buying a product or service. You're literally inviting someone into your personal space, right? Your home, your car, sometimes even sharing pretty personal info. And that vulnerability, that risk, creates a whole different level of, a need for trust.
Yeah, it's true. The stakes are definitely higher. It's not just, will this product work or will they show up on time? It's more like, will I feel safe with this person in my house?
Absolutely. It's about feeling secure, knowing that you can trust this complete stranger you've never met before. And to kind of understand how this whole trust thing works in this context, we can look at the work of sociologist Lynn Zucker. She outlined these 3 basic ways trust is built: characteristic-based, process-based, and then institutional-based. And you see these popping up all the time when you're on these platforms.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example, how would I encounter this characteristic-based trust on, let's say, Airbnb?
Okay, well, have you ever noticed how you're kind of drawn to a host who seems like they share your interests, maybe they come from a similar background, or even just have a profile picture that makes them seem like, more approachable?
Yeah, I think I get it. It's that feeling of, they seem like my kind of people.
That's exactly it. That's characteristic-based trust. We just naturally feel more comfy with folks who feel kind of familiar. Like that saying, birds of a feather flock together.
Makes sense. So what about process-based trust?
Process-based trust is all about those reviews and ratings. The star ratings, the comments. You're basically putting your trust in the collective wisdom of all those other users who've interacted with this person before. If a bunch of people have had good experiences, you're going to feel more confident booking with that person or using their services.
Right. It's like checking Yelp before trying a new restaurant. You trust those other diners' experiences to kind of steer you in the right direction.
Spot on. And then the last one, institutional-based trust, that's where the platform itself steps in. Think about those verification badges, right? Or guarantees they offer. Even just the platform's overall rep for resolving disputes fairly. These things give you a feeling of security, knowing that there's this system in place, like a safety net, in case things go south.
It's like having that peace of mind, knowing that even if something goes wrong, there's a backup plan, someone to turn to. So the platform acts like a neutral party, a sort of, a referee, ensuring a level of trust.
Exactly. And these 3 types of trust usually work together, They kind of build on each other to give you that confidence to interact with people you wouldn't normally trust.
So we've got these different systems in place for building trust. But then you add in cultural differences, and things get really interesting, don't they? I know we've all heard about those differences, but how does that actually impact trust, especially online, when you're not even face-to-face?
Yeah, that's the tricky part. You got to remember that culture, it's like this invisible script that shapes how we see and interact with the world. It affects our communication styles, our expectations, what we value, even how we perceive things like, cleanliness or being on time.
So even though we're all on this global platform, all those cultural differences are still kind of there under the surface, influencing how we interact.
Precisely. And what's fascinating is that this specific platform is designed for cross-cultural experiences. People are actively seeking out those interactions with people from different backgrounds. But then the irony is those very cultural differences can actually affect who gets accepted as a guest.
Wait, so are you saying that even if I've got amazing reviews and a great profile, my chances of getting booked could be lower just because I come from a different culture than the host?
That's what the research suggests, yeah. They found that hosts tend to be less likely to accept requests from guests who are culturally different from them. And it's not like they're being intentionally discriminatory. It's more like those differences might create a bit of hesitation, you know? Even though the platform has those signals, we talked about ratings, verifications, those are supposed to create a level playing field.
Okay, now I'm a little confused. I always thought good ratings were like the golden ticket to building trust online. How could they actually widen the gap between cultures?
Yeah, it does seem a bit counterintuitive, right? But remember those 3 types of trust? Well, ratings, those are a form of process-based trust. We're relying on the past experiences of others. But here's the thing, those experiences are being filtered through a cultural lens.
Ah, I see what you mean. So a host might look at those glowing reviews and think, yeah, but those are from people in a completely different culture, so maybe their standards are different from mine.
Exactly. They might, without even realizing it, kind of downplay those positive ratings, especially if they haven't had much experience hosting people from that particular culture. And that creates this unfair situation where guests from certain cultures have to work harder to prove they're trustworthy, even with awesome reviews.
That just doesn't seem right. I mean, isn't the whole point of these platforms to connect people from all over the world?
You would think, right? And that's what makes the study's findings about platform verification so interesting. They looked at how things like verifying your ID or connecting social media accounts impact trust. And what they found was pretty surprising.
Okay, so instead of relying on potentially biased ratings, you have the platform stepping in and providing a more objective measure of trust.
You got it. And this seemed especially helpful for those guests who were culturally different from the host. It's almost like the platform is vouching for them, saying, hey, we've checked this person out, and they're legit no matter where they're from.
It goes back to that institutional-based trust, right? People are just more likely to trust the platform's judgment than individual ratings from a bunch of diverse backgrounds.
Exactly. And this could have a big impact on how platforms can promote fairness and make sure everyone feels welcome. If they really want to build a truly global community, they need to make sure their trust signals are strong and impartial.
This is all super fascinating. But I can't help but wonder, what does this all mean for me? You know, someone who loves to travel and experience different cultures, should I be worried that my cultural background is going to work against me?
You know, not necessarily. The key here is awareness. Now that you understand these dynamics, you can be more proactive about building trust, especially when you're dealing with hosts from different cultures.
So it's not just about those amazing reviews and being a great guest. It's about being aware that cultural differences could affect those initial trust judgments and being ready to put in that extra effort to bridge the gap.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of good communication, clear expectations. That stuff's always key, no matter where you're from. Plus, remember those institutional trust signals we talked about. Get verified on the platform, give detailed info about yourself, anything you can do to build that credibility.
It's like we need to become more conscious trust builders in these cross-cultural situations. We can't just rely on assumptions that might work in more, homogenous settings.
I love how you put that. We have to be more intentional about building trust across cultures, and that's where those universal values come in, Honesty, respect, being kind. Those things can overcome any cultural barrier.
It's a beautiful vision, and I think these platforms can really help make that kind of connection happen, especially if we're all willing to be a little more mindful about how we build trust with each other.
Totally agree. And the researchers also did some really interesting extra analyses that dig even deeper into how these cultural biases show up in the data. Want to explore those after a quick break.
I always love digging deeper. Let's unpack those findings after a quick break. All right, so before the break, we were talking about how those cultural differences can really mess with trust on these platforms. Like, even when you think you're looking at objective measures like ratings and reviews.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, right? Those ratings may not be as objective as we think. In these extra analyses they did, the researchers looked closer at how those cultural biases might be affecting, the ratings themselves.
Okay, I'm definitely curious what they find.
Well, imagine this.
Yeah.
You're a host, and you're trying to figure out if you should accept a guest from a different culture. So you check their ratings, right? And you see all these glowing reviews. But then it hits you, who exactly are these reviews coming from?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
They're coming from other hosts who have interacted with this guest before.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really wild. they found that the positive impact of those ratings, how much they actually convinced the current host, was way weaker if those previous hosts who gave them were also culturally distant from the current host.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the guest's culture, but also the culture of the people who are basically vouching for them.
Exactly. It's like those hosts are sitting there thinking, well, those other hosts, they come from a whole different world, so maybe their standards are like totally different from mine. They're basically, without even realizing it, discounting those positive ratings just because of, the perceived cultural difference of the people who wrote them.
It's like we're building these cultural echo chambers, even when it comes to ratings and reviews.
Yeah.
Like we're more likely to trust reviews from people who are like us.
Yeah, it really shows just how much those cultural biases can affect us, Even when we're trying our best to be objective, our perceptions are shaped by our own experiences and background.
This is making me rethink how I look at, everything online. Mm-hmm. So you can't just take those ratings at face value, right? You got to think about the context, who's giving the rating, where they're coming from.
Exactly. It's like developing a more critical eye, realizing that these trust signals aren't always as neutral or objective as they might seem at first glance.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, but I'm wondering, what about the opportunities? I mean, these platforms are still connecting people from all over the world in ways we've never seen before.
Absolutely. And I think this research can actually help us be more, intentional about building trust across cultures. For platforms, it's about understanding those biases, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then coming up with ways to make things more fair for everyone.
So like what? Stronger verification systems maybe? Or even cultural sensitivity training for hosts?
Those are great ideas. Platforms could even try highlighting the things guests and hosts have in common, like their values or interests, almost like a cultural compatibility score.
I love that. Help people focus on what brings them together, not what sets them apart.
Right. And for travelers, it's about being aware that those cultural differences might be at play, in those first impressions. But that doesn't mean you can't overcome them.
So be ready to put in a little extra effort, show you're trustworthy, especially if you're dealing with someone from a different culture.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of communication. Being upfront, setting clear expectations, that kind of thing. And those institutional trust signals are key too. Get verified, fill out your profile, whatever you can do to make people feel more comfortable.
It's like we have to be more active, more intentional about building those bridges between cultures. We can't just rely on those automatic assumptions that might work when everyone's, from the same background.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. We have to be more conscious trust builders in these cross-cultural interactions, and that's where those shared human values really come in.
Like honesty, respect, kindness. Those are things that go beyond culture, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. If we focus on those core values, I really think we can create a more trusting, more inclusive world.
It's a great vision. And I think these platforms can play a big role in that. But, this research doesn't just apply to online platforms. It applies to any situation where you're using signals to figure out who to trust, especially when you're dealing with different cultures.
That's true. And it might make you think twice about those reference letters you send and receive, and how cultural biases might play into hiring decisions too.
That last point really got me thinking about reference letters, those cultural biases kind of sneaking in there. It's not something I'd ever really thought about before.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's easy to miss, especially because we think of those letters as kind of objective assessments of someone's work and character. But this research is suggesting that even those can be skewed by, cultural perceptions.
So you're saying a hiring manager could be unconsciously downplaying a great reference letter just because it comes from someone in a culture they're not familiar with?
It's definitely possible. Think about it. You're a hiring manager, right? You're going through applications and you come across someone with awesome qualifications and a ton of great reviews. But some of those references are from people with, names you don't recognize, maybe institutions and countries you've never even heard of. It's only natural to feel a bit hesitant about those, right?
Oh, I see the connection now. It's just like what we were saying about online ratings. Those hiring managers might be thinking, their standards could be completely different, or I don't really know what this praise actually means.
Exactly. And it's not that they're intentionally trying to discriminate. It's more like those subtle unconscious biases can creep in and mess with our judgment, even when we think we're being totally objective.
This is kind of unsettling. So someone with amazing skills and stellar references could still be at a disadvantage just because of their background or the background of the people recommending them?
Yeah, that's the scary part about these cultural biases. It suggests that even these traditional signs of trust, like reference letters, might not be as fair as we think.
So what can we do about it? This seems like a pretty deep-rooted problem.
Well, it is systemic, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything. Organizations need to start recognizing these biases and put things in place to kind of even things out, like, blind resume reviews where you take out any identifying info like names and universities. That can help reduce the impact of unconscious biases.
Makes sense. And I'm guessing structured interviews that focus on, specific criteria, not just gut feelings, would also help create a more level playing field.
Totally. And training can make a big difference too. Like if you give hiring managers the tools to recognize and challenge their own unconscious biases, that can go a long way. It's about making the whole hiring process more conscious, more deliberate.
This has really opened my eyes. I never realized trust was this complicated. It's not just about someone's character, right? It's about the systems, cultural backgrounds, and those hidden biases that can totally warp our perceptions.
I think you nailed it. This whole deep dive has really been about encouraging everyone to, become more critical thinkers, to question those assumptions, and realize that trust isn't this simple black and white thing.
Yeah, it's about digging deeper, looking beyond those surface level signals, and really understanding the person and where they're coming from.
Exactly. And while cultural differences can definitely make things harder, they also present these amazing opportunities for growth and understanding.
I love that. It reminds me that even with all this complexity, there's always room for connection, for hope.
For sure. And with that in mind, I think it's time to bring our listeners into the conversation.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What are your experiences with trust in different situations? Have you ever felt like cultural differences, or even just, different backgrounds, have affected your interactions? Share your stories, your insights, your questions. This conversation is just getting started. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more captivating deep dives like this one. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.